Admiral Jake Morrison adjusted his uniform one last time before stepping through the airlock of Nexus Prime. The massive space station floated in neutral space, far from any single species territory. It was the perfect meeting place for the 7 major galactic civilizations. Jake had been to dozens of these diplomatic meetings over the years, but something felt different this time. The message from the Galactic Council had been urgent. They needed to discuss matters of extreme importance regarding territorial expansion and galactic security. Jake assumed it was about the usual trade disputes or border conflicts. Humans had been expanding into new systems faster than any other species in recent decades, and it sometimes caused friction with their alien neighbors. Jake walked through the station's main corridor, his boots echoing on the metal floor. The architecture here was designed to accommodate all 7 species, which made everything look strange and uncomfortable. The ceilings were too high for humans, but too low for the tall ethereals. The doorways were wide enough for the bulky Zephyrians, but awkwardly large for everyone else. As he approached the council chamber, Jake noticed something odd. Usually, these meetings had dozens of representatives from each species, along with their advisors and security teams. Today, the corridors were almost empty. Only a few essential personnel moved quietly through the halls, and they all avoided eye contact with him. Dr. Lisa Grant, his chief science officer, caught up with him near the entrance. She had been exploring the station's research facilities while Jake prepared for the meeting. "Admiral, something's not right here," Lisa whispered as they walked together. I tried to access their public databases to review the agenda, but most of the sections are classified. Even the basic star charts have restricted areas I've never seen before. Jake frowned. What kind of restrictions? Entire sectors marked as forbidden zones or unexplored territory? But the age of the data suggests these restrictions have been in place for centuries, maybe longer. Why would advanced civilizations leave so much space unexplored? Before Jake could respond, the chamber doors slid open. The sight inside made him stop in his tracks. Instead of the usual crowded meeting hall, only 7 figures sat around a circular table, one representative from each major civilization, with no advisors or assistants present. The room felt heavy with tension. Queen Valtara of the Zephyrium Hive was the first to acknowledge Jake's arrival. Her insectoid form stood nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the chamber's lights. When she spoke, her voice carried the harmonic buzz typical of her species. "Admiral Morrison, please take your seat. We have much to discuss, and time is not our ally." Jake walked to the human chair, noting how the other representatives avoided looking at him directly. The crystalline speaker Thren of the Axiom Collective pulsed with nervous blue light, while Ambassador Wisp of the Nebula Commune's gaseous form swirled more rapidly than usual. "Thank you all for coming," Jake said, settling into his chair. "I assume this is about the recent expansion into the Kepler sector? If there are territorial concerns, I'm sure we can work out a reasonable solution." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. The alien representatives exchanged glances, or what passed for glances in their various forms. Finally, Queen Valtara spoke again. "Admiral Morrison, we must ask you a direct question. Are you aware of any unusual discoveries your exploration teams have made in the outer sectors?" Jake considered the question carefully. "Define unusual." "Our teams regularly discover new phenomena, mineral deposits, and occasionally signs of ancient civilizations. Is there something specific you're concerned about?" Speaker Thren's crystalline form brightened to a sharp white light. "Ancient civilizations. Yes, that is precisely what concerns us. Has your species encountered any structures or technology that appears to be of unknown origin?" "Unknown origin?" Jake repeated. "We found ruins from several extinct species, but nothing that couldn't be explained by normal archaeological study." "Why do you ask?" Ambassador Wisp's gaseous form condensed slightly as he spoke. "Admiral, there are regions of space that all our civilizations have agreed to avoid. These agreements are thousands of years old, predating most of our current governments. Your species has been expanding into these regions." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Avoided regions? This is the first I've heard of any such agreements. Why weren't humans included in these arrangements? The representatives exchanged those nervous glances again. Queen Veltara's compound eyes focused on Jake with uncomfortable intensity. Because your species did not exist as a spacefaring civilization when these agreements were made. The restrictions were put in place for the safety of all galactic life. Safety from what? Jake demanded. Dr. Lisa Grant leaned forward in her chair. Admiral, I think this relates to what I found in their databases. The restricted zones correspond to areas where our colonies have reported unusual phenomena. Strange energy readings, derelict structures, and in some cases, complete communication blackouts. Speaker Thren's light pulsed erratically. Your colonies have encountered the structures? Some have reported finding large metallic objects in deep space, Lisa confirmed. Our scientists assumed they were natural formations or debris from ancient wars. Are you saying there's something else? The chamber fell silent again. Jake could feel the weight of unspoken secrets pressing down on them all. He had attended hundreds of diplomatic meetings, but he had never seen alien representatives look so afraid. Queen Veltara finally broke the silence. Admiral Morrison, what I am about to tell you is known only to the highest levels of our governments. 3 million years ago, our galaxy was terrorized by a race of machines called the Devourers. They consumed entire star systems, converting matter into more of themselves. No weapon could stop them, no defense could hold them. What happened to them? Jake asked, though he was beginning to suspect he knew the answer. They vanished, Ambassador Wisp said, his form swirling with agitation. One day they simply stopped. Our ancestors found their constructs floating dead in space, but no one knew what had defeated them. The structures your colonies have found are Devourer machines. Jake felt the blood drain from his face. Are they still dangerous? We don't know, Speaker Thren admitted. For 3 million years, they have remained dormant. But recent reports from your colonies suggest that human contact may be reactivating them. Dr. Lisa Grant pulled out her datapad and began scrolling through reports. The communication blackouts, the energy readings. Admiral, some of our colonies have reported equipment malfunctions that match what they're describing. Why are you telling us this now? Jake asked. Why not warn us before we entered these regions? Queen Veltara's mandibles clicked nervously. Because there is something else, something we have discovered through millennia of study. The Devourers were not defeated by any of our civilizations. They were stopped by another race entirely. What race? A species that appeared suddenly in the galaxy, wielded technology beyond our understanding, and then vanished just as mysteriously as they had arrived. We call them the progenitors. Jake waited for more explanation, but the aliens seemed reluctant to continue. What does this have to do with humanity? The chamber fell silent once more. The alien representatives looked at each other as if debating whether to reveal some terrible secret. Finally, Queen Veltara spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Morrison, based on our analysis of human genetic material, technology, and behavior patterns, we believe your species may be descended from the progenitors. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He stared at the alien representatives, searching their faces for any sign that this was some kind of joke or misunderstanding. But their expressions remained deadly serious. That's impossible, he said finally. Human evolution is well documented. We evolved on Earth over millions of years. Surface evolution, yes, Speaker Thren agreed. But there are gaps in your genetic record that cannot be explained by natural selection alone. Your species displays capabilities that should not be possible with your current level of development. Dr. Lisa Grant looked up from her datapad, her face pale. Admiral, I'm seeing reports here that I've never been briefed on. Human soldiers surviving impossible odds, colonists adapting to alien environments faster than should be possible, and instances of humans somehow understanding alien technology without training. Jake's mind raced. If what they were saying was true, then humanity's rapid expansion into space wasn't just coincidence. They were returning to regions their ancestors had once controlled. What do you want from us? He asked. Queen Veltara's compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights like mirrors. We want you to stop expanding into the forbidden zones. We want you to recall your colonies from devourer space. And most importantly, we want you to help us understand what your ancestors did to defeat the machines, because we fear they may be waking up. Captain Ryan Brooks stared at the empty space ahead of his ship. The UCS horizon floated at the edge of the Kepler void, a region that appeared completely blank on every star chart in the galaxy. According to official records, nothing existed. Here, no stars, no planets, no matter of any kind. But Ryan's instruments told a different story. "Captain, I'm getting some strange readings," Lieutenant Ben Clark called from the engineering station. "There's definitely something out there, but it's not showing up on visual scanners." Ryan turned to his science officer. "What do you think, Amy?" Dr. Amy Foster looked up from her console, her brow furrowed with confusion. "The energy signatures are unlike anything I've ever seen. Whatever's out there is massive, but it's not reflecting light the way normal matter should. It's almost like it's absorbing everything that hits it." "Could be some kind of natural phenomenon," suggested Sergeant Maria Santos from the communications station. "Maybe a dark matter concentration or an unusual nebula." Ryan had been captain of the Horizon for 5 years, and he had learned to trust his crew's instincts. But he had also learned to trust his own gut feelings, and right now something was telling him that they were about to discover something important. "Then, take us in slowly, full scans on everything. I want to know what we're dealing with before we get too close." The Horizon moved forward into the void. For the first hour, their sensors detected nothing but empty space. Then, gradually, shapes began to appear on their screens. At first, they looked like asteroids or space debris. But as they got closer, the true scale became clear. "My God," Amy whispered, "these aren't rocks. They're structures." The objects floating in the void were enormous. Each one was the size of a small moon, made of some kind of dark metallic material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They had angular, geometric shapes that were clearly artificial, but unlike any architecture from any known civilization. "How many are there?" Ryan asked. Ben's fingers flew over his console. "Sensors are detecting at least 50 of the large structures, maybe more. And there are thousands of smaller objects scattered throughout the area. Any signs of life?" "No life signs," Amy reported. "But there are definitely energy readings. Very faint, but consistent. It's like they're in some kind of hibernation mode." Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. He remembered the briefing Admiral Morrison had given all exploration captains before they left Earth, something about being careful in uncharted regions and reporting any unusual discoveries immediately. At the time, it had seemed like standard precautions. Now, he was beginning to understand why the Admiral had looked so worried. "Maria, try to establish communications. Use all standard frequencies." "Already tried, Captain. No response." "But there's something else. I'm picking up a very weak signal from one of the smaller structures. It's not a communication signal, more like a dot beacon." "Can you track it?" "Yes, sir." "It's coming from a structure about 2 kilometers to our port side." Ryan made a decision that would change everything. "Take us to it, but keep our weapons ready and maintain a safe distance." As the Horizon approached the beacon source, the structure became clearer on their screens. It was smaller than the others, roughly the size of a large space station, but it had the same dark metallic appearance. Strange symbols were carved into its surface, glowing faintly with an inner light. "Captain," Amy called out, her voice tense. "The energy readings are increasing. Whatever this thing is, our presence seems to be activating it." "Should we back away?" "I don't know. The energy increase is gradual, not explosive. It might just be responding to our scans." Ben looked up from his station. "Captain, I'm reading some kind of docking mechanism on the structure. It's almost like it's designed to interface with other ships." Ryan stared at the structure on the screen. Every instinct told him to retreat, to report their discovery to Earth Command and let someone else deal with it. But another part of him, a part he didn't fully understand, was drawn to the ancient construct. Ben, I want you to analyze that docking mechanism. See if our systems are compatible. Sir, are you sure that's wise? Maria asked. We don't know what this thing is or what it might do. I know it's risky, Ryan admitted. But we're explorers. This is the kind of discovery that could change everything. We need to learn what we can. Amy looked at her readings again. Captain, the energy signature is definitely responding to our presence, but it's not hostile. If anything, it seems ... curious. Ben worked at his console for several minutes before looking up with surprise. Captain, this is incredible. The docking mechanism is compatible with our systems. Not just compatible, but it's like it was designed specifically for human ships. That's impossible, Maria said. These structures have been here for who knows how long. Humans have only been in space for a few hundred years. I know it doesn't. Makes sense, Ben replied. But the interface protocols are definitely designed for human technology. It's like whoever built this knew we would come here someday. Ryan felt that strange pull again, stronger this time. Without fully understanding why, he gave the order that would change his life forever. Ben, dock with the structure, but maintain power to all systems and be ready to undock immediately if anything goes wrong. The docking process was surprisingly smooth. The ancient structure seemed to guide the horizon into position, adjusting its own systems to match theirs perfectly. When the connection was complete, Ben's console lit up with new readings. Captain, we have a stable connection. The structure is sharing power with us, and it's also downloading information into our computer systems. What kind of information? Not sure yet. It's in a format I don't recognize, but our computers seem to be translating it automatically. Amy joined Ben at his station. This is fascinating. The data appears to be some kind of historical record. Star charts, technological specifications, and what looks like ... personal logs. Ryan walked over to look at the screens. The symbols were strange, but as he watched, they began to make sense. It was as if his mind was automatically understanding their meaning. Can you make sense of any of it? Some of it, Amy said, her voice filled with wonder. This structure appears to be some kind of archive or museum. And according to these records, it was built by a race called the progenitors. The name hit Ryan like a physical blow. Admiral Morrison had mentioned that name in his briefing, though he hadn't explained what it meant. Now, staring at the ancient symbols, Ryan began to understand. Ben, I want you to interface directly with the structure's systems. See if you can access more detailed information. Captain, is that safe? Probably not. But I have a feeling this is important, more important than our safety. Ben hesitated for a moment, then placed his hand on the interface console. The moment his skin made contact, the entire structure came alive. Lights flashed throughout the ancient construct, and energy readings spiked dramatically. Ben, what's happening? Ryan called out, but Ben couldn't answer. His eyes had rolled back, and he was standing perfectly still. Data was flowing across the screen so fast that it was impossible to read. The structure was downloading information directly into his mind. Amy, get him off there. But when Amy tried to pull Ben away from the console, she found she couldn't. It was as if some invisible force was holding him in place. The download continued for several minutes before Ben suddenly gasped and collapsed to the floor. Ben! You all right? Slowly, Ben opened his eyes. But they were different now, filled with knowledge that hadn't been there before. When he spoke, his voice was calm and steady. Captain, I know what these structures are. They're not just archives. They're weapons. Weapons built to fight something called the Devourers. The Devourers, a race of machines that consumed entire star systems. The progenitors built these structures to defend the galaxy against them. And Captain, there's something else. Something important. Ben stood up slowly, his movements more confident than before. The progenitors didn't just build these weapons. They were human, just like us. The bridge fell silent. Ryan stared at Ben, trying to process what he had just heard. That's impossible. Humans evolved on Earth. We have fossil records, genetic evidence. The records show otherwise, Ben said, his voice filled with certainty. Modern humans are descendants of the progenitors. We're not just exploring space, Captain. We're coming home. Amy looked at her console, where new information was still being processed. Captain, if this is true, then these structures aren't just weapons, they're our inheritance. Technology left behind by our ancestors. Ryan felt the weight of the discovery settling over him. If Ben was right, then everything they thought they knew about human history was wrong. They weren't just another young species taking their first steps into the galaxy. They were the heirs to an ancient empire that had once protected all galactic life. Maria, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we've made a significant discovery and need immediate backup. What should I tell them we found? Ryan looked at the ancient structure visible through the bridge windows, its lights pulsing. With newfound life, tell them we found our past, and I think it's about to catch up with us. Admiral Jake Morrison sat across from the alien representatives in the council chamber, his mind still reeling from their revelation. The silence stretched on as each species waited for someone else to speak first. Finally, Jake found his voice. You're telling me that my entire species is descended from these progenitors, and you've known this for how long? Queen Veltara's compound eyes reflected the chamber lights as she answered. Our suspicions began roughly 200 years ago when humans first achieved faster-than-light travel. Your technology developed far too quickly for a species that had never left its home planet. Dr. Lisa Grant leaned forward in her seat. What kind of evidence do you have? Speaker Thren's crystalline form pulsed with blue light. Initially, it was merely observational. Human soldiers displayed reaction times that should have been impossible. Your colonists adapted to alien environments faster than any known species. Your engineers could understand and repair alien technology without proper training. That could be explained by human intelligence and adaptability, Jake argued. Perhaps, Ambassador Wisp agreed, his gaseous form swirling slowly. But then came the border wars. Jake remembered the border wars well. A series of conflicts between human colonies and various alien raiders over the past 50 years. Human forces had been outnumbered and outgunned in almost every engagement, yet they had won decisive victories time and again. What about the border? Wars? He asked. Queen Veltara activated a holographic display in the center of the table. Images of battle scenes played out in 3 dimensions, showing human soldiers fighting against various alien species. Jake recognized some of the footage from official military records. Watch carefully, she said, pointing to a particular scene. This battle took place on Kepler 7. A single human squad was surrounded by 40 Krellian raiders. According to all tactical analysis, the humans should have been wiped out in minutes. The hologram showed the human squad taking defensive positions behind some rocky outcroppings. The Krellians, large reptilian creatures with advanced plasma weapons, began their assault, but something strange happened. The human soldiers began moving and fighting with a precision that seemed impossible. Look at their movements, Speaker Thren observed. They're not just fighting, they're anticipating attacks before they happen. They're using tactics that our military analysts had never seen before. Jake watched as the human soldiers seemed to flow around the battlefield like they were dancing. They moved in perfect coordination without any visible communication. One soldier would reload while another provided cover, all without speaking or signaling. This is impressive teamwork, Jake said, but it's not supernatural. Watch what happens next, Queen Veltara said. In the hologram. One of the human soldiers was struck by plasma fire and fell to the ground. He appeared to be critically wounded, possibly dead. But moments later, he stood up and continued fighting as if nothing had happened. That's impossible, Dr. Lisa Grant whispered. Krellian plasma weapons can melt through battle armor. No human could survive a direct hit, yet he did, Ambassador Wisp noted. And this wasn't an isolated incident. We have records of hundreds of similar events during the border wars, humans surviving impossible injuries. displaying impossible strength and using tactics that seemed to come from nowhere. Jake stared at the hologram, trying to find a rational explanation. Could be advanced medical technology or enhanced armor. We examined the battlefield afterwards, Queen Veltara said. The human equipment was standard issue. Nothing that could explain what we observed. Speaker Thren's form brightened. There's more. Show him the Nexus Station incident. The hologram changed to show a space station under attack. Jake recognized it as Nexus Station, a human research facility that had been raided by pirates 3 years ago. The station was attacked by a fleet of 12 ships, Queen Veltara explained. The humans had only one small defense platform and a handful of fighters. They should have been overwhelmed. The display showed the human defenders launching what appeared to be a hopeless counterattack. But as Jake watched, the small human force began systematically destroying the pirate ships one by one. Their tactics were flawless, their timing perfect. The human commander was a woman named Captain Sarah Blake, Ambassador Wisp said. She had no formal tactical training beyond basic military academy instruction. Yet she outmaneuvered pirates who had been raiding successfully for decades. How do you explain that? Jake asked. We believe she was accessing genetic memory, Speaker Thren replied. Knowledge and abilities passed down from her progenitor ancestors, activated under extreme stress. Dr. Lisa Grant was taking notes on her datapad. Have you tested this theory? We've been monitoring human colonies for decades, Queen Veltara admitted, with their permission, of course. We've documented hundreds of cases where humans in life-threatening situations displayed abilities far beyond their training or experience. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of monitoring? Medical scans, performance evaluations, psychological profiles, Ambassador Wisp explained. All conducted through legitimate channels. Your own military has been unknowingly helping. Usus, gather this data. You've been spying on us, Jake said, his voice hardening. We've been trying to understand you, Queen Veltara corrected. Because if you truly are descendants of the progenitors, then you represent either the galaxy's greatest hope or its greatest threat. The chamber fell silent again. Jake looked at each of the alien representatives, trying to read their expressions. Fear was evident in all of them, but there was something else too. Hope, perhaps, or desperation. What did the progenitors do that scares you so much? He asked. Speaker Thren's form dimmed slightly. They didn't just defeat the Devourers, they controlled them. The progenitors had technology that could reprogram matter at the quantum level. They could reshape entire planets or destroy them with a thought. That's impossible, Dr. Lisa Grant said. We have evidence, Queen Veltara replied. There are star systems where entire planets have been moved from their original orbits. Others where the laws of physics seem to work differently. The progenitors didn't just use advanced technology. They rewrote the fundamental rules of reality. Jake tried to process this information. If they were so powerful, what happened to them? They sacrificed themselves, Ambassador Wisp said solemnly. According to our records, the progenitors realized that their power was too great for any single species to wield. They chose to give up their technology and scatter their descendants across the galaxy. But the descendants retained the genetic potential, Speaker Thren added. Under the right conditions, humans can still access fragments of their ancestors' abilities. Jake stood up and walked to the chamber's large window. Outside, he could see the stars scattered across the void of space. Each one represented countless worlds, countless civilizations, countless lives. What do you want from us? He asked without turning around. We want you to understand the responsibility that comes with your heritage, Queen Veltara said. The progenitors were protectors, not conquerors. They used their power to defend the galaxy, not to rule it. But we also want you to be careful, Speaker Thren added. Your expansion into the Forbidden Zones is awakening things that have slept for millions of years. The Devourer constructs are responding to human presence. Jake turned back to face the aliens. Are you saying we're causing the Devourers to reactivate? We're saying your presence is changing them, Ambassador Wisp replied. We don't know if that's good or bad yet. Dr. Lisa Grant looked up from her datapad. Admiral, I'm receiving a priority message from Captain Brooks on the horizon. They've made contact with something in the Kepler void. Jake felt his stomach drop. What kind of contact? They found structures, sir. Ancient structures that appear to be responding to human presence. And Admiral, one of the crew members, has been exposed to some kind of alien technology. His vital signs are showing impossible readings. The alien representatives exchanged glances. Queen Veltara spoke first. It's beginning, the awakening we feared for centuries. Is Captain Brooks in danger? Jake asked. Not from the structures? Speaker Thren replied. But if the Devourers detect the activation of progenitor technology, they will respond. And we don't know if they'll see modern humans as allies or enemies? Jake looked at the message on Dr. Grant's pad. Captain Brooks was requesting immediate backup and reporting discoveries that could change everything. But now Jake understood that those discoveries might also doom them all. I need to contact Earth Command, he said finally. What will you tell them? Queen Veltara asked. Jake thought about his crew, his species, and the weight of a 3-million-year-old legacy. The truth, that we're not just explorers anymore. We're coming home to a galaxy that's been waiting for us to remember who we really are. The alien representatives watched as Jake activated his communicator. The conversation that followed would determine not just humanity's future, but the fate of every living being in the galaxy. Captain Ryan Brooks watched his crew with growing concern. It had been 6 hours since Ben's contact with the progenitor structure, and the changes in his engineer were becoming impossible to ignore. Ben moved with a confidence that hadn't been there before, and when he looked at the alien technology, he seemed to understand it instinctively. Ben, how are you feeling? Ryan asked for the 3rd time that day. Better than I've ever felt in my life, Captain, Ben replied without looking up from his console. The knowledge transfer is still processing, but I'm beginning to understand how these systems work. Dr. Amy Foster approached with her medical scanner. Ben, I need to run another check on your vital signs. Some of the readings from earlier don't make sense. Ben allowed Amy to scan him, but Ryan could see the frustration in his engineer's eyes. Captain, with respect, we're wasting time with medical checks. We need to explore more of these structures. There's so much to learn. We need to make sure you're safe first, Ryan insisted. Whatever happened to you during that download could have long-term effects. Amy looked at her scanner readings and frowned. Captain, his brain activity is showing patterns I've never seen before. It's like he's processing information at 10 times the normal rate. Sergeant Maria Santos looked up from her communication station. Captain, I'm receiving another signal from Earth Command. Admiral Morrison is requesting an immediate status report. Ryan had been dreading this moment. How could he explain to Earth Command that his engineer had been transformed by alien technology? How could he describe structures that seemed to recognize human DNA? Tell them we're conducting a detailed survey of the discovered structures and will provide a full report within 24 hours, he said finally. Sir, they're requesting real-time communication. Tell them our communication systems are experiencing interference from the local phenomena. It's not entirely untrue. As Maria sent the message, Ben suddenly stood up from his console. Captain, I'm detecting another structure about 5 kilometers away. This one is different from the others. Different how? It's not dormant. It's been waiting. Ryan felt that familiar chill run down his spine. Waiting for what? For us, Ben said simply. For humans to return. Dr. Amy Foster looked at her readings again. Captain, Ben's neurological patterns are becoming more stable, but they're definitely not normal human patterns anymore. I'm still human, Ben said, turning to face them all. But I'm also something more now. The progenitors didn't disappear. Captain, they evolved. They became part of their descendants, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Ryan stared at his engineer, trying to reconcile the man he had known for years with this new version who spoke with ancient knowledge. Ben, I need you to explain what's happening to you in terms we can understand. Ben paused as if searching for the right words. Imagine you had a library in your mind, but all the books were locked. The progenitor technology didn't add new information to my brain. It gave me the keys to unlock what was already there. Genetic. Memory, Amy whispered. It's actually real. More than memory, Ben corrected. Genetic programming. The progenitors encoded their knowledge and abilities into their descendants' DNA, but they locked it behind barriers that could only be opened by their own technology. Ryan looked out at the vast field of ancient structures floating in space. Around them, how many humans could be affected by this? All of them, eventually. But the process requires direct contact with progenitor technology, and it has to happen under the right conditions. Maria's console chimed with an incoming message. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the UCS Defender. They're requesting permission to dock, Ryan frowned. The Defender? That's Lieutenant Commander Steve Hayes' ship? What's he doing out here? According to the message, Earth Command sent them to provide backup after receiving our initial report. Tell them they're cleared to dock, but warn them about the unusual phenomena in this area. As the Defender approached the horizon, Ben suddenly became agitated. Captain, I need to access that other structure I detected. It's important. Not until we understand what's happening to you. You don't understand, Ben said urgently. The structures aren't just archives or weapons. They're guardians, and something is coming. Before Ryan could ask what he meant, Amy's medical scanner began beeping frantically. Captain, I'm detecting massive energy fluctuations throughout the area. Whatever these structures are, they're all activating simultaneously. Ryan looked out the bridge windows and saw lights beginning to pulse throughout the ancient constructs. The dormant machines were coming to life, responding to some signal that only they could detect. Maria, contact the Defender. Tell them to maintain their distance until we understand what's happening. I'm trying, Captain, but something is interfering with our communications. The Defender docked with the horizon just as the energy readings peaked. Lieutenant Commander Steve Hayes came aboard immediately, followed by his security team. Ryan had known Steve for 10 years, and he could see the concern in his old friend's eyes. Ryan, what the hell is going on out here? Steve demanded. Earth Command is going crazy trying to understand your reports. It's complicated, Ryan began, but Ben interrupted him. Commander Hayes, you need to get your ship away from here immediately. The Guardians are detecting a threat. Steve looked at Ben with confusion. Who is this? And why is he talking like he knows more than our sensors? This is Lieutenant Ben Clark, my chief engineer, Ryan explained. He's had some exposure to the alien technology. Before Steve could respond, the ship shuddered as something massive passed nearby. On the main screen, they could see enormous shapes moving through space. The Devourer constructs, dormant for millions of years, were awakening. My God, Amy whispered, they're huge. The Devourer machines were unlike anything any of them had ever seen. They moved like living creatures despite being made of metal and energy. Each one was the size of a small city with tentacle-like appendages that seemed to reach out and taste the space around them. Ben, are we in danger? Ryan asked. Ben studied the readings on his console, his enhanced mind processing information at incredible speed. I don't know. The Devourers are trying to identify us. They remember the progenitors, but they're not sure if we're the same species. Steve looked between Ryan and Ben. Someone needs to explain to me what's happening here. The short version? Ryan said, we found structures built by an ancient human civilization. They've awakened some kind of genetic programming in Ben, and now we're face to face with the machines that nearly destroyed the galaxy 3 million years ago. That's impossible. A week ago I would have agreed with you, Ryan replied. Ben suddenly turned to face them all, his eyes wide with realization. Commander Hayes, how many crew members do you have aboard the Defender? 37. Why? Because the Devourers are going to test us. They're going to determine whether modern humans are worthy successors to the progenitors. Test us how? Steve asked. Before Ben could answer, the ship shuddered again. On the screen, they could see one of the Devourer constructs approaching. Slowly, it was scanning them with beams of energy that made their instruments go wild. It's probing our ship, Amy reported. But it's not attacking. It's looking for something specific, Ben said. Signs of progenitor technology or genetic markers. Suddenly, Maria gasped and pointed at her console. Captain, Commander Hayes, you need to see this. On her screen, the readings showed that both ships were being scanned not just from the outside, but from the inside. The energy beams were somehow penetrating their hulls and examining every person aboard. It's scanning our DNA, Ben realized. Looking for active progenitor genes. What happens if it finds them? Steve asked. I don't know, Ben admitted. But I think we're about to find out. The scanning continued for several minutes. Ryan watched the Devourer construct with fascination and terror. The machine was ancient beyond imagination, a remnant of a war that had nearly destroyed all life in the galaxy. Yet it moved with purpose and intelligence. Finally, the scanning stopped. The Devourer construct moved away from their ships and took position among the other awakening machines. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, all at once, every Devourer in the area began broadcasting the same signal. What are they saying? Ryan asked. Ben listened to the transmission, his enhanced mind translating the ancient machine language. When he spoke, his voice was filled with wonder and fear. They're saying, "Welcome home, children of the progenitors." The test begins now. Steve looked at Ryan with growing alarm. What test? Ben's face had gone pale. The same test they gave the original progenitors 3 million years ago. The test that determined whether humanity was worthy to be the galaxy's protectors. What happens if we fail? Ben looked out at the massive Devourer constructs surrounding them. If we fail, they'll finish what they started 3 million years ago. They'll consume everything. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the emergency session chamber on Earth, facing the Global Council. The room was filled with presidents, prime ministers, and military leaders from every nation on the planet. The weight of what he had to tell them made his chest feel tight. Ladies and gentlemen, Jake began, what I'm about to share with you will change everything we thought we knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. President Helen Carter leaned forward in her chair. Admiral Morrison, your preliminary report mentioned ancient alien civilizations and threats to galactic security. We need details. Jake activated the holographic display in the center of the room. Images from the Nexus Prime meeting appeared, showing the alien representatives and their evidence about human abilities during the border wars. The galactic community has been hiding the truth from us for centuries. We are not a young species taking our first steps into space. We are the descendants of an ancient human civilization called the progenitors. The room erupted in murmurs and shocked whispers. General Paul Turner stood up from his seat. That's impossible, Admiral. Human evolution is well documented. We evolved on Earth over millions of years. That's what we believed, Jake replied, but the evidence suggests otherwise. The progenitors seeded their descendants across the galaxy before sacrificing themselves to stop a machine race called the Devourers. Dr. Elizabeth Gray, the chief science advisor, shook her head. Admiral, this sounds like science fiction. What proof do we have? Jake changed the display to show footage from Captain Brooks' mission. 3 hours ago, Captain Ryan Brooks made contact with progenitor structures in the Kepler void. One of his crew members has been transformed by exposure to their technology. The display showed Ben Clark operating alien systems with impossible ease, his movements confident and precise. The council members watched in stunned silence as he demonstrated abilities that no human should possess. As we speak, Jake continued, Captain Brooks and his crew are facing a test from the awakened Devourer machines. The outcome of that test will determine not just their fate, but the fate of every living being in the galaxy. President Carter stood up slowly. What kind of test? According to the alien representatives, the Devourers are determining whether modern humans are worthy successors to the progenitors. If we pass, we inherit our ancestors' role as galactic protectors. If we fail, ... If we fail, General Turner prompted, the Devourers will finish what they started 3 million years ago. They'll consume everything. The chamber fell silent. Jake could see the weight of the revelation settling over the world's leaders. They had come here expecting to discuss trade agreements or military strategies. Instead, they were being told that humanity's survival depended on a test their species wasn't even prepared for. Meanwhile, in the Kepler void, Captain Ryan Brooks watched the massive Devourer constructs arrange themselves in a perfect circle around the human ships. Each machine was the size of a city, their dark surfaces pulsing with ancient energy. "Ben, what exactly is this test?" Ryan asked. Ben studied the readings on his enhanced console, his transformed mind processing information at incredible speed. "The Devourers are going to present us with scenarios. Situations that test our judgment, our compassion, and our willingness to sacrifice for others." Lieutenant Commander Steve Hayes looked skeptical. "How do you know all this?" "Because it's all here," Ben said, tapping his temple. A genetic memory includes records of the original test. The progenitors faced the same challenge when they first encountered the Devourers. Dr. Amy Foster checked her medical scanner. "Then, your brain. Activity is off the charts. Are you sure you can trust these memories?" "I have to," Ben replied, "because if I'm wrong, we're all dead." The space around them suddenly filled with light as the Devourers began their test. The first scenario materialized as a holographic projection that surrounded both ships. They found themselves looking at a star system with 12 inhabited planets. "The scenario is simple," Ben explained as he interpreted the Devourer transmission. "A plague is spreading through this system. We have the technology to stop it, but only enough to save 6 of the 12 planets. The test is to determine which planets we choose to save." Ryan felt his stomach drop. "How are we supposed to make that choice?" "That's the test," Ben said. The progenitors had to prove they would make decisions based on the greatest good, not personal gain or political advantage. Steve studied the holographic planets. "What factors should we consider? Population size? Strategic importance?" According to the genetic memory, the original progenitors chose based on which planets had the greatest potential to help others. They saved the worlds that could contribute the most to rebuilding and protecting the galaxy. Ryan made his decision quickly. "We save the planets with the largest populations of children and the most advanced medical facilities. Those worlds will have the best chance of surviving and helping others." The moment he spoke, the holographic scenario changed. The Devourers had accepted his choice and moved to the second test. This time, the projection showed a massive space battle. Human ships were fighting against an unknown enemy, but they were severely outnumbered. The test offered them a choice: retreat and save their forces, or sacrifice themselves to buy time for civilian evacuations. "This is testing our willingness to sacrifice for others," Ben explained. Ryan didn't hesitate. "We stay and fight." Military personnel swore an oath to protect civilians, even at the cost of our own lives. Again, the Devourers accepted the choice and moved to the third test. Back on Earth, the Global Council was receiving real-time updates on the test through quantum communication links. The world's leaders watched as their representatives in space faced decisions that would determine humanity's future. "They're making the right choices," Dr. Gray observed. "But how many tests will there be?" Admiral Morrison was in constant communication with the alien representatives at Nexus Prime. "According to Queen Veltara, there are typically 5 tests. Each one becomes more difficult. The 4th test appeared around the human ships. This time, it showed the Earth itself under attack by an overwhelming force. The scenario offered humanity a choice: use a weapon that could destroy the attackers but would also devastate Earth's ecosystem, or allow the planet to be conquered. To preserve the environment, Ryan looked at his crew, knowing that this decision would define who they were as a species. "We find a third option. We evacuate as many people as possible and then use guerrilla tactics to slowly drive out the invaders. We never sacrifice our home or our principles." The Devourers paused longer this time, as if surprised by the answer. Then they transmitted their approval and began the final test. The 5th scenario was different from the others. Instead of showing them a crisis to solve, it showed them the galaxy as it could be. Thousands of species working together, exploring new worlds, sharing knowledge and resources. It was a vision of perfect galactic harmony. "This is the final test," Ben said, his voice filled with wonder. "They're showing us what we could build, but there's a catch." "What kind of catch?" Steve asked. "To achieve this future, humanity would have to give up its independence. We would become the galaxy's protectors, responsible for maintaining peace and order. We would never again be just another species looking out for ourselves." Ryan understood the weight of the choice. Accepting would mean that humanity would spend eternity serving others, putting the needs of the galaxy above their own desires. For expansion or exploration. "What did the original progenitors choose?" he asked. "They accepted the responsibility," Ben replied, "and it cost them everything. They became so focused on protecting others that they forgot to protect themselves." Ryan looked at the beautiful vision of galactic harmony, then at his crew. These people had followed him into the unknown, trusted him with their lives. Now he had to make a choice that would affect every human who would ever live. "We accept," he said finally. "But on our terms. We'll be protectors, but we won't lose ourselves in the process. We'll serve the galaxy, but we'll remain human." The Devourers went silent for several minutes. Then, all at once, they began to change. The dark, threatening machines transformed into something beautiful. Their surfaces became reflective, their energy readings shifted from hostile to peaceful. "They're not just accepting our choice," Ben said in amazement. "They're joining us. The Devourers were never meant to be destroyers. They were meant to be partners." On Earth, the Global Council watched as the test concluded. The transformation of the Devourer machines was visible even through their long-range sensors. "What happens now?" President Carter asked. Admiral Morrison looked at the data streaming in from the Kepler void. "Now we live up to our promise. We become what our ancestors were meant to be. We become the galaxy's protectors." The alien representatives at Nexus Prime were already reaching out, offering to share their knowledge and resources. The barriers that had kept humanity contained were dissolving, replaced by partnerships and alliances. Captain Ryan Brooks looked out at the transformed Devourers, now glowing with peaceful light. His crew had passed the test, but more importantly, they had chosen to be something greater than themselves. "Maria, send a message to Earth Command," he said. "Tell them we're coming home. And tell them we're bringing friends."